Under the amber sky. The first time Daniel saw Evelyn, the world felt like it had stopped breathing. It was late autumn in a small seaside town, where the air carried the scent of salt and the warmth of fading sunlight. The leaves were a riot of crimson and gold, and the amber sky looked as if it had been painted just for her. She stood by the pier, hair swept by the wind, holding a book to her chest as if guarding a secret. Daniel, a wandering photographer, had arrived that afternoon, looking for moments to capture before winter claimed the coast. But what he found was not just a moment, it was a beginning. "Do you always stare at strangers like that?" she asked with a playful smile when their eyes met. "Only when they look like they've stepped out of a dream," he replied, and the way her lips curved told him she was used to hiding behind her words, but never behind her heart. They met again the next day, and the next, as if fate had decided the tide should carry them together. Evelyn worked at a small bookshop that smelled of paper and cinnamon tea. Daniel began visiting more often, claiming to look for photographic inspiration, but really, he was just looking for her. They spent afternoons walking along the shore, talking about everything, her love for old poetry, his stories from distant cities. She told him she believed the sea kept people's secrets, that waves were just the ocean's way of whispering them back. He told her he believed every soul had one great love, and maybe, just maybe, he had found his. One evening, the wind was stronger, and the sky was bruised with violet clouds. Daniel wrapped his coat around her shoulders and asked, "What are you afraid of?" "Time," she whispered. "That we never have enough of it." He didn't know then that Evelyn's heart carried a quiet shadow, a lingering illness she had kept hidden, not wanting pity to taint what they had. But the truth came one winter morning, in the stillness between falling snowflakes. Instead of pulling away, Daniel held her closer. "Then let's make every day feel like forever," he said. And they did. They danced in empty streets lit by flickering lamplight, read books under blankets while rain tapped on the windows, and wrote each other letters even when they were in the same room. He photographed her in every season, spring sunlight tangled in her hair, summer laughter spilling into the waves, autumn leaves catching in her scarf, winter's hush resting gently on her eyelashes. Years later, when the illness finally took her, the town's sky burned amber again, just as it had the day they met. Daniel stood by the pier, camera in hand, knowing he could never capture her fully, because Evelyn was not just a face, not just a moment. She was the story behind every picture, the unspoken line in every poem, the warmth in every winter he would endure. And every evening after, he returned to that pier, letting the wind carry her memory, listening to the sea whisper her name back to him. Because some loves don't end. They simply change the way they live in you. Under the lantern sky. The small riverside town of Marlow was known for its quiet charm. Narrow cobblestone streets wound past rows of pastel houses, each adorned with flowers in the window boxes. Every summer, the townspeople celebrated the Lantern Festival, when hundreds of glowing paper lanterns would float into the sky, carrying wishes and dreams with them. Elena had always loved this night. She was a schoolteacher, gentle in manner and warm in spirit, and though she was loved by her students and respected by the townsfolk, she kept her own heart closely guarded. A heartbreak years ago had left her wary of love's promises. That evening, as she stood by the riverside with a lantern in her hands, she almost didn't notice the man beside her until he spoke. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his voice deep but calm. She turned and found herself looking at a stranger, tall, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes. His expression carried a quiet thoughtfulness, as though the world around him often drew him into deep reflection. "It is," she replied, then hesitated before adding, "I don't think I've seen you in Marlow before." "I'm not from here," he admitted. "I'm passing through for a few weeks. My name is Adrian." They launched their lanterns together, standing side by side as the warm light illuminated their faces. Elena noticed the way Adrian watched the lanterns drift upward, not just with admiration, but with a certain longing. Over the next days, they crossed paths often. He came to the little cafe where she read in the afternoons. They met at the market, by the riverside, and once beneath the old willow tree that arched over the path. Conversation started casually but soon stretched into hours. Adrian told her he was a photographer, traveling to capture moments that could not be staged, glimpses of life's quiet beauty. Elena told him about her students, her love for books, and how she never learned to swim despite living near the river her whole life. One evening, as the sunset painted the water gold, Adrian asked if she'd like to see the photographs he had taken in Marlow. They sat on the wooden pier, their knees nearly touching, and he showed her images on his camera, an old couple holding hands, a child chasing a kite, a row of lanterns reflected in the river. When she reached the last photo, she froze. It was of her, standing beneath the willow tree, sunlight spilling through the leaves around her like a halo. "You took this without me knowing," she said softly. "I wanted to capture the way you looked at the world," he replied. "It's different. Gentle. Hopeful." Her heart, long locked away, stirred. But the days passed, and the end of Adrian's stay approached. The thought of his leaving pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. On his last night, they met again by the river, where the lanterns still floated, remnants of the festival. "I don't know where I'll be in a month," he said, "but I know I don't want this to be the last time I see you." She looked at him, at the way his eyes reflected the lantern light, and took a step closer. "Then don't let it be." They kissed under the drifting glow of the lanterns, the river whispering beside them. And though the night would eventually end, Elena knew something had changed. Her heart was no longer afraid of love's uncertain path. Months later, a letter arrived from a faraway city. Inside was a photograph of the Marlow River, taken from the very pier where they had sat, and a note in Adrian's handwriting. "The world is wide, but I will always find my way back to you. The stars between us." The little coastal town of Astor Bay was always wrapped in the scent of salt and pine. Every evening, the horizon would blur into shades of gold and rose, and the lighthouse on the cliffs would send its slow, comforting sweep of light across the sea. Evelyn Hart had returned to Astor Bay after 5 years in the city, carrying in her suitcase the weight of dreams that had not come true. She had once imagined herself as a celebrated painter, yet all she brought back was a collection of half-finished canvases and a heart that no longer believed in magic. One evening, seeking quiet, she wandered to the old pier. The wind teased her hair and the waves laughed in a rhythm that almost felt like breathing. She was about to leave when a voice called from behind. "Careful," it said, warm and steady, "the boards there are loose." She turned to see Daniel Rivers, the boy she once knew, though he was no longer a boy. He was taller now, his shoulders broad, his face sunbrowned from years spent working on fishing boats. But his eyes, those deep, steady eyes, were exactly as she remembered. They talked easily, as if the years had never stretched between them. He told her he'd stayed in Astor Bay, taking over his late father's boat, while she shared small, edited pieces of her city life. They laughed about their childhood adventures, the time they tried to catch fireflies in mason jars, the summer they built a raft that sank within minutes. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn found herself seeking his company more often. They'd walk along the cliffs, their conversations meandering from old memories to quiet dreams. One night, Daniel invited her out to the lighthouse. The air was sharp and clear, the stars spilling across the sky like scattered diamonds. "You know," he said softly, leaning against the railing, "I used to stand here and wonder if you'd ever come back. Every boat on the horizon, I'd imagine it was you." Her heart caught in her chest. She had spent years believing she had to leave to find something worth loving, yet here, under the endless sky, she realized she might have been wrong. In the weeks that followed, they began to paint new memories, Daniel teaching her how to steer the boat, Evelyn sketching him while he mended nets, late-night talks on the pier with their feet dangling above dark water. Her laughter returned, unforced and bright. One evening, as autumn began to touch the leaves with gold, Daniel took her hand. Evelyn, he said, his voice unshaken yet filled with something deeper than hope, I don't care where life takes us, as long as I get to watch the sunsets with you. She looked at him, at the man who had been her first friend, her quiet anchor, her unexpected home. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel the urge to run towards something else. She was already where she was meant to be. The lighthouse beam swept across the sea once more, and in its soft glow, she whispered, then let's watch them all, together. And in that little town where the ocean kissed the shore, Evelyn found that love wasn't always a storm or a grand adventure. Sometimes, it was a steady light, guiding you back home.